This is a story of one of the most daring strikes in naval history, the attack on Dwarka. In March 1965, relations between India and Pakistan were at a breaking point. So to pay homage to the sacrifices of our martyrs, we bring you the story of one of their most daring operations, Operation Dwarka. Enter Operation Dwarka. The plan was simple, yet audacious. A small force of Pakistani ships would sail from Karachi to Dwarka, located on the western coast of India. There they would launch an attack on the Indian Navy and merchant ships in the harbor. It was a risky move, but one that could pay off big if successful. At around 2 a.m., the lookout on PNS K-Bar spotted some lights in the distance. Could this be their target? As they got closer, they confirmed their suspicions. It was the Indian naval base at Dwarka. The time had come. The year was 1965. Tensions between India and Pakistan had been simmering for some time. Guns were trained on the Indian ships in the harbor. One of them, the INS Delhi, was a major casualty. The ship had been hit and was on fire. As the Indian sailors desperately tried to fight back, the Pakistani ships maneuvered skillfully to avoid their return fire. How could Pakistan, a supposedly friendly neighbor, attack them without warning? It was an act of treachery that left many Indians questioning their own judgment. Its mission was not to engage in combat, but to lay mines around Dwarka, creating a deadly hazard for the Indian Navy. The submarine had arrived on December 9, 1965, laying mines off the coast of Dwarka. The scene was one of utter devastation. The Indian Navy was in shock. They had not expected such a brutal attack from Pakistan. Hundreds of Indian sailors lost their lives, and many others were injured. It was a bold and audacious plan that caught the Indian Navy off guard, but it also had far-reaching consequences. Though the operation may have been a success, it also marked the beginning of a new chapter in the rivalry between India and Pakistan. The attack on Dwarka was a defining moment for both nations, shaping their destinies in ways that would be felt for years to come. The attack galvanized the Indian people, and they rallied together to support their nation. Did you know that the Pakistani ships involved in the attack were named after famous battles in Islamic history?
The Indian Navy, though shaken, regrouped and became even stronger.
Pakistan, despite the victory, paid a heavy price.
The operation was a resounding success for Pakistan, but it came at a cost. The PNS K-Bar and PNS Babur had sustained damage during the attack, and the PNS Toba had been forced to flee after running out of fuel. But as they struggled to cope with the loss of the Kukri, more explosions ripped through the water. In fact, many of the veterans involved in the attack did not even reveal their participation until much later in life. This secrecy was necessary to protect the element of surprise, as well as to prevent any retaliation from the Indian Navy. One by one, the Indian ships fell victim to the deadly mines. Some historians argue that it was a necessary and justified attack to defend Pakistan's interests, while others condemn it as a cowardly act of treachery. Regardless of one's perspective, the attack was undoubtedly a bold and daring move that had far-reaching consequences. It then retreated, leaving behind a deadly trap for the unsuspecting Indians. But out of the ashes of this attack, a new resolve was born. The Indian Navy was determined to defend their nation and protect their honor. They had done all they could, and now it was up to the Indian Navy to deal with the damage. As they pulled away, they saw the burning ship, the INS Delhi, a grim reminder of the fierce battle that had just unfolded. Among them was the flagship of the Western Fleet, the powerful aircraft carrier Vikrant. But little did they know that they were walking into a deadly trap. As the ships entered the harbor, the first explosion rocked the water. The INS Kukri, a corvette, had struck one of the Pakistani mines. The blast was so powerful that it split the ship in half, sinking it instantly. The battle was on. Suddenly, the tranquility of the night was shattered by the deafening roar of gunfire. The mines were too powerful, and the attacks were coming too fast. As the sun set over Dwarka, the harbor was littered with debris and the bodies of the fallen sailors. The once mighty fleet of the Indian Navy was now a shadow of its former self. The Pakistani ships opened fire, and the Indian Navy was caught off guard. The element of surprise had worked perfectly for the Pakistanis. They had managed to infiltrate one of India's most important naval bases without being detected. And when India began construction on a road connecting its Ladakh region to Tibet, Pakistan saw it as a threat to its security. This led to the 1965 war, which would become known as the Second Kashmir War. This meant that they had only one chance to inflict maximum damage. But they didn't know that this single chance would be enough. Back at Karachi, Rear Admiral Shah anxiously awaited news of the attack. The attack had been swift and unexpected, and they were still trying to assess the damage. The Inst Delhi was a major blow. It was one of their most important ships, and its loss would be a significant setback. But the Indian Navy was not one to stay down for long. He began repairing the damaged ships and preparing for a counterattack. He had entrusted his best ships and crew to this mission, and he knew that their success was crucial. The fighting was intense, with both sides making incursions into each other's territory. But neither side could gain a decisive advantage. After failing to resolve their differences over Kashmir and other territorial disputes, the two nations went to war. But this was no ordinary conflict. It was a clash not just of armies, but also of navies. And at the heart of it all was one audacious plan, Operation Dwarka, which could change the tide of the war forever. Pakistan Navy Day is celebrated every year on September 5. As the war dragged on, Pakistan realized that it needed a new strategy to turn the tide in its favor. The operation was planned by Rear Admiral Mohammad Sharifuddin, who was the commander of the Pakistan fleet. He assembled a task force consisting of 3 ships: the PNS Khabar, a guided missile destroyer; the PNS Babur, a guided missile frigate; and the PNS Toba, a submarine. The task force sailed from Karachi on December 4th, 1965, under the cover of darkness. Their mission: infiltrate Indian waters undetected and launch a surprise attack. Meanwhile, in Dwarka, the Indian Navy was caught off guard. They had not anticipated an attack from Pakistan, and so they were unprepared for what was to come. The Pakistani task force arrived off the coast of Dwarka on December 8, 1965. They had managed to remain undetected, thanks to the thick fog that had rolled in. This was perfect for the Pakistanis. They had only one chance to make this work, and they needed the element of surprise to be on their side. As the ships closed in on their target, the Indian naval base at Dwarka was still blissfully unaware of the danger that lurked in the fog. The PNS Khabar and PNS Babur moved into attack position. In the chaos that ensued, several Indian ships were damaged, but the Pakistani ships were low on ammunition. It only brought enough for a few salvos. As the first streaks of dawn illuminated the sky, the Pakistani ships began to withdraw. Back at Dwarka, the Indian Navy was in disarray. News of the attack spread like wildfire. The entire country was shocked and outraged. But in the midst of all this, there was one ship that remained hidden: the PNS Toba, the Pakistani submarine. On December 11, 1965, the Indian ships started entering the harbor. Chaos erupted as the sailors struggled to evacuate. Some jumped into the water, while others raced to lifeboats. The Indian sailors fought bravely, but it was a losing battle. In the end, 4 Indian ships were sunk, and many more were damaged. The attack on Dwarka remains one of the most daring naval strikes in history. So remember this day, December 1965, when Pakistan took a stand and changed the course of history. Now let's talk about some interesting facts about this historic event. Another interesting fact is that the operation was kept top secret until very recently. Finally, the attack on Dwarka remains a controversial topic to this day. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up.